let's start at the beginning.
Yes.
When you first met Chantal at school, and what do you remember? What was your first impression of her?
We were in a very posh school where we were good for nothing, and that already created a link because we were a small group of young girls. It was a lycée, as we say in French, just for girls. And Chantal was quite different from the other girls, of course, but maybe I was too. But we went to cinema together. That was the first link because the school was close to the center of Brussels, and it was easy to go from noon to 2 to go to see films.
When you were supposed to be at school?
Yeah.
And you famously were the friend that she saw Godard's Pierre Le Fou with. What was what was your impression? And
yes, it was amazing because we were used to go and watch films like westerns, thrillers, comedies, and for the first time it was completely different. It was a story, but not quite a story. It was poetry, it was like paintings, it was a discovery, and then we were convinced that cinema could be something different than just entertainment.
Mm-hmm. And you were both decided at that point to go to film school, is that right?
In fact, Chantal convinced me to go to the film school because it was a brand new film school in Brussels, and we have been there. But we were not prepared at all because at that time, I think it's still like this, it was quite a serious school, and in the first year you were attending math lessons, physics, chemistry, and for us it was quite disappointing because we were thinking we were going to write scripts, to take pictures, and so we didn't stay a long time there.
You're also in the film that, but you both had to make films in order to get into the film school. And
thank you.
And you're in Chantal's film, which we showed here, one of her entrance films, which she made in a shoe shop. I don't know if you could tell us a little bit about that, and how did you get the cameras and the.
Because to be admitted in that school, you have to show what you were able to do, and for example, you could bring a script or pictures. And Chantal decided to make films with a small 8mm camera, and it was a very funny story about me being a pickpocket in a shoe shop. But I completely forget that shooting, and it's Chantal, sister, who was really a child at that moment, who remembered that the reels were somewhere, and we found them in the Cinematheque in Brussels.
The company that you founded with Chantal, that was the production company that was founded in 1975. So she'd already made Saute ma vie and Je te Hilal.
Yes, and the American films,
yes.
Hotel Monterey.
Yeah. And did you play a role in those, or was it sort of later on that you came on board?
No, I didn't play a role. It was the idea of our lawyer. At that time it was a friend, and he said it's easy in Belgium to make a kind of cooperative. We had to be 7 persons, and with a very small capital of money. At that time it was something like 25 euro per person. So with such a small amount, we had a company. And that was Paradise Films.
And why did you call it Paradise?
It's an idea of Chantal. We were trying to find something more radical, but we didn't find, and Paradise came out.
still quite radical in an industry that,
Yes, maybe.
doesn't really allow
Quite
much
naive,
utopian.
maybe.
Yeah. On Gentleman, you were the assistant director on the film. The film changed a lot from when Chantal wrote the script originally. It was a completely different story, and she famously woke up one night and had to change everything.
Yeah, it was a good idea to change everything.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the original film was actually going to be? Because it's pretty different.
The original story was quite a story after the year 68. It was about a housewife leaving her husband, and she has no work, so she became a sex worker, and she wants to live in a kind of community with an alternative life. And there it was a young woman, and they have a story together, and the husband is not angry at all. For him, it's the opportunity to go on a boat to America. I'm happy that Chantal changed everything. But it was already Delphine Seyrig, and a French actress that maybe you have seen in a lot of French films from Jacques Rivette, Bulle Augier, who was pretty famous at that time.
Oh, pretty different. How do you feel about the films being anointed by the Sight and Sound Greatest Films poll? It winning 3 years ago.
It was a shock. The sister of Chantal, who is living in Mexico, sent me a message, and with the difference of time, it was midnight in Brussels. I was ready to jump in my bed. I read that. I said to myself, stay calm, sleep, we will see tomorrow. And tomorrow at 9, my telephone was ringing all the time.
Wow. Yeah. She obviously famously hated making lists, like, the poll asks people to do. How do you think she would have felt?
Oh, she would be happy, of course. So yeah. I'm sure she would be very happy.
Yeah. Why do you think the film has sort of struck a chord with people today? I suppose, like, at the time it was released, it was respected by cinephiles, academics, but now it's, being embraced by a much wider audience.
Yeah, because it was, for Chantal, it was quite difficult, because on one side, like you said, the festival director loved the film, cine lovers loved the film, but in Belgium, especially in Belgium, it was called the most boring film in all the Belgian cinema history. So it was not comfortable for Chantal. So now it's the revenge.
Yeah.
But I'm so sad that Chantal is not there to enjoy the revenge.
Yeah, definitely. After Jeanne Dillman, she went to New York to make News from Home, and I think in one of the mother's letters, she says Marilyn will bring you some money. So obviously
$20.
$20. And then after that, you worked together on Rendezvous d'Anna with Aurore Clément, who it was a very long collaboration with. How did Aurore Clément come to be in the film?
Well, it was an idea of Delphine Seyrig, because Delphine was working with Aurore in Italy on a film of Monicelli, if I remember well. And Delphine said to Chantal, come and meet Aurore. And Chantal came, and she said to Aurore, you are too nice, too beautiful for the play. And then she was searching for more than 1 year, and she didn't find anything. And she came back to Aurore and said, if you agree, it's for you. Wow. But before, you have to go and see my film, Je tue elle. And I'm sure you will refuse it.
Okay.
And so Aurore went to watch the film, and she was so touched that she rushed to Chantal and said, if you want me,
you can.
We work together.
Okay, well. And Chantal wanted somebody who could kind of be similar or have some similarities to her.
Yeah, because first of all, she was somebody looking like her, and Aurore is quite the opposite.
Yeah.
Of course.
Obviously, there's a sort of, she talks about sort of not wanting to be imprisoned by her autobiography, but also, it's sort of there in all of her films. Kind of, how did she sort of, sort of approach that in her film? What's your experience of kind of her taking from her life and, maybe being inspired by it? Well, that sort of is a fine line, isn't it?
You mean of her life and
yes.
what she wrote?
Yeah, and how
because
sort of transformed into something else as well on screen.
Because a lot of people were talking about autobiography, and Chantal refused all the time the term autobiography, and she said, what is autobiographical? It's the feeling inside the image, but you don't have to search what is similar of my life and what is in the script. Mm-hmm. But I like the idea it was a feeling of autobiography.
Mm. Yeah, I think her sort of relation to emotion in her film throughout her kind of work is really interesting, isn't it? Because in the 70s, she sort of famously said to Delphine on the set of Jeanne Dielman, no psychology. But sort of that kind of changes a little bit.
For Aurore also, when Aurore told me, when I asked Aurore, tell me what Chantal was telling you. And she said, no psychology, Aurore, no psychology.
Yeah.
No psychology.
Yeah. And then the sort of early 80s, she changes her sort of some of the things that she's interested in, like music and I guess emotion and romance kind of really come to the fore in her films. So a film like Toute une nuit, which she worked on together. And it's quite interesting that, she sort of, before she'd said, I don't want to use music in my films because she thought it was lazy as a sort of signpost. But she changed kind of...
Oui, but she didn't use music like it was in the commercial...
No, of course not.
...movies.
Yeah. Yeah, but she does sort of change.
Yeah.
The Les années 80, or the 80s, was a film that you worked on together. That was, as I understand it, originally a film that was supposed to convince people that she could make a musical.
It was supposed to be a trailer, and we got a budget to make 4 minutes in 35 millimeter. And Chantal made a long feature film, but it doesn't help at all to raise funding for the film.
No.
It went to the Festival of Cannes, but nobody gave us money to make the Golden 80s. It's a long story after années 80.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a great film. It's one of my favourites because you get to see behind the scenes a little bit about and you also see her love of music in that film too, with her singing and things like that. What was it like, working with her sort of as a producer? Was it very sort of challenging? Because obviously she was somebody who liked to discover a film as she was making it. She didn't like to sort of say, particularly in this documentary, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and this is going to happen and this is going to be the end.
Yeah. And that's why I don't feel... working as a producer, I don't like the term producer for my collaboration with Chantal because it was a story of friendship before a story of work. I got the feeling that I was trying to make the film possible, to find the money, to make the files, which was a very boring work, very tedious. To make, those huge files to get money. But my pleasure was to go with Chantal on the set, because when you are producing, you are most of the time in your office. You are not on the set anymore, just to come like, people are afraid when I was coming. That means maybe we are We have to rush and blah, blah, blah. And so my pleasure was to be with Chantal. And for example, for Dest, I went to a part of the journey from Brussels to Odessa. I went to Moscow with her. On Toute une Nuit, I was working like a set designer, but it was a way to be close to her, to see her working.
And in Toute une Nuit, it's actually your apartment features in the film.
That's another story.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it sort of looks like you had a real adventure together. I mean, some of the photos that I've seen you took on set of Dest, the snow is, really high, and you're all in these huge, big kind of fur or whatever. Big.
It was amazing could you imagine, we drove from Brussels to Odessa in a country who was collapsing, with crazy people with guns asking us money, especially in Moldavia. They were nothing, they were just crooks, they were not police. Arriving in small villages. Oh, it was quite an adventure. And that's the way I like.
And was she just in the car saying, "Oh, we're going to stop now"?
Oh, that's for me. It was the most interesting, because when you drive for days, you are in a kind of daydreaming. And Chantal was like us, daydreaming. And suddenly she said, "We stop here," and it was quite heavy because it was not digital camera. It was still a camera with a tripod. And Chantal said, "It's here," and she made the shot. And she was right. It was the right place to make the shot. That was amazing for me.
Another of your favourite memories of working with Chantal, you've said, was the time that you went looking for costumes for Histoire d'Amérique, which bears some similarities to Tomorrow We Move in terms of the tone. It's sort of has this tragicomic sort of aspect to it. Can you tell us about working on that film?
Yeah, but it's another, because you have to imagine that Chantal made 43 films in her life. It's a lot. And quite different films, from documentary to comedies to commissioned films. And Histoire d'Amérique was a commissioned film. It was supposed to be a portrait of a writer. And she chose Isaac Bashevis Singer. And then, for I don't know which reason, you remember, we tried to
diverted
the commission film. And it was Histoire d'Amérique, but with a very small budget. And so it was a French producer in charge, and I was very happy to be not in charge of that diverted commission. And we need somebody to make the costume. And I said, why not? I would love to make the costume. And so I did. And it was quite a moving experience, because it was a lot of Jewish comedians in the film, pretty old. And we went to their apartment looking in the, how do you say that?
The wardrobe.
Yeah, the wardrobe. Finding the costume. It was nice.
And the film is, it's very similar to Demain on Déménage. How do you look back on this film sort of today?
Yeah. But like I said, it's a film I love very much, and I'm very sad that it was so unknown, let's say, not to say underappreciated, that people didn't see what was the purpose of Chantal. It's a comedy, but it's a tragic comedy. And maybe people don't feel at ease in that kind of film. I don't know why. But for me, it was so funny but speaking about something very, very, very sad, because the character of the mother, even if she is experienced the worst in the camp during the war, this woman has still a sense of joy. She's even a kind of whimsical woman. And as she lost her husband, she's widow, she cannot stand to live alone, she decides to come to our daughter. And the character of the daughter is really Chantal. Chantal, who was unable to look after herself first, her apartment, living in a completely unorganized place. And it's funny, but it's not really funny because, you know, when they cook a chicken, it's too much smoke. When they visit the apartment with the French actor Jean-Pierre Mariel, it's a smell of disinfection. And he said it's a smell of memory. And I like the balance between sadness and funny thing, because it's funny, it's really funny. And even it's very daring, because if you remember, the pregnant woman doesn't want to have a child.
It's an alternative life, a bit like the original Sandelman. Yes. Yeah. And the diary in the film is actually...
And the diary...
It's actually Chantal grandmother's diary.
The only thing which remains from the grandmother.
Yeah.
So it's maybe it's the reason that people don't feel at ease in that film, because the balance of fun and sadness. But it's always an attraction, being far from your country, being far from your family. You feel more free. And at that time, I will not say now, but you have to imagine New York in the 70s. It was a shabby city. It was completely different from now. Now there are shops in the same place where homeless were living. It's amazing. Canal Street, Bowery, they are now fancy, trendy street. And so Chantal, I'm sure, got a feeling of freedom being there. And it's at the same time, it's a cliche to feel free in the States. It's a cliche. But I think more than that, it's being far away from people you know. You feel more free to do what you want to do. But you know, I love restoration. It's quite challenging, because I was born with 35 millimeter. Maybe the documentary South was made with a digital camera, but it was the only one. And I always love to work with DOP, and there it's the place for them. But you don't have to try to correct mistake. You have to find. You have to be faithful to the images of Argentic cinema. And as Chantal is not there anymore, I'm a kind of, it sounds very sad, a last witness of how it was, you know. That's why they call me. There is a lot of, you know, filmmakers are writing a lot of scripts, and sometimes it never goes to a film. That's very sad for them. Even big Fellini had a lot of script which never became films.
Were there any of Chantal's that you?
But Chantal, it was a nice adaptation of 2 books of Colette, Chérie et la fin de Chérie. I don't know if you know that, but
it never happened.
No, it never happened, unfortunately.
We just better end on a nicer note than it never happened. The short film at the start was La Paresse. Obviously, sort of gives the impression that she was lazy.
No, she was not lazy at all. She had such a amount of energy. I was the lazy one in the team.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for joining us
thank
today.
You
and thank you everybody for staying.
And there.
Yeah, the Marilyn's words are also in this publication, which we've made to go along with the season, along with many other of Chantal's collaborators, and it's available in the BFI shop if you're interested.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.